Om Ganatimirandasya Ganangana Sarakya Chaksurin Miritam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanyamano Bhistam Stapitam Yanabhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Ragana Gamritam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shivishakanvitam Sham Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Garada Kanta Namostate Jayatam Surito Pango Mama Mandir Matergati Matsavasha Parambo Jaurata Ramada Mohano Srimad Sarasaram Bamsi Carson Vinesh and Urbika Gopinata Striyasaram Divyad Vrindarana Kapadrumada Srimad Ratnagana Shima Shanisto Shri Sridhara Shidagovinda Prasadavi Sevamanush Manami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanitaya Chajigatitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Padata Shami Tanamane Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauramani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sanyavadi Praskita Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. Welcome Rakesh on Facebook Live, to Jean, Manasaganga, and to Rob, my Zoom partner, and the king of takeaways, the king of pithy phrases, Rob Grant. Brent, thanks for jumping on board. Govinda Dave, both Govinda Dave, Rob and I were on a nice Zoom call, or Tuesday night Zoom call yesterday evening, and it was a very enlivening call. We came up with actually it was Govinda Dave who came up with an absolutely brilliant idea. I'll tell you more about that as it unfolds. We have a tour today. We have a tour tomorrow. We have another tour Friday. Just got a text early this morning from a teacher at Skyridge High School in Lehigh, which is about 30 miles up the road. They had planned on going to the Gurudwara, the Sikh Gurudwara in Salt Lake City, but the Gurudwara called them late last night and canceled. So they didn't want to abort the trip. So they asked, can they come to Spanish Fork instead? And they'll be arriving about 9 o'clock. A bunch of students, teacher for a tour as well as for lunch. So if we curtail this session, it's because I have to go and cook some quesadillas and samosas and halter some llamas in anticipation of the trip. During the summer months, when the kids are out of school, we get a lot of people, families coming off the freeway, going to and from Yellowstone, Salt Lake City, down to San Diego, Vegas, Los Angeles, a lot of families. And then when school goes back into session, we don't have quite as much of that kind of a traffic. But what happens is many of the schools organize field trips here as part of their curriculum. So we get it coming, we get it going. We're so well situated by the grace of the Lord. Thanks for jumping on, Gary Montana, as well. We're proceeding here in our discussion of Bhisma. What an amazing character. You know, the thing that jumps out at you right away is that he fought against Krishna. He shot arrows at Krishna. Krishna ran at him at one point with a chariot wheel in his hand, ready to smash Bhisma to dust. And yet here he is, the last stage of his life, 256 years old, according to the information I have, laid out prostrate on a bed of arrows on the battlefield. And he's going to speak for, I think it's over 40 days in that condition. First of all, none of us would survive even 5 minutes with one arrow through and through. And Bhisma's got his whole body perforated by arrows. And not only is he surviving, he's surviving for 40 days after the culmination of the battlefield. And he's speaking some of the highest, most detailed philosophy. Someone who's in that position, wounded on the battlefield, would certainly be vocal, but it wouldn't be anything intelligible, anything discernible. It certainly wouldn't be detailed. It would just be inarticulate screams of agony. It is said that most soldiers fatally wounded on the battlefield, scream for their mothers. So you would hear normally, mama, mama, mama. Bhisma is such a yogi. And of course, as we know, he was benedicted by his father, Santanu, to leave his body at will. He's waiting for Uttarayana. He's waiting for the sun to switch its positions, go from the southern to the northern hemisphere, which is an auspicious time for leaving the body. But there's another meeting, according to the commentators in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Uttarayana. It's an astrological term referring to the time that the sun moves from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, or vice versa. I'm not sure the details. But the commentators, they take the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is already sweet, nectarine, and they make it even sweeter by the way they churn the words and terms and devotional phrases. So one commentator, I believe Vishwanath Chakrabarti, has said that Uttarayana means Uttara was the mother of Parikshit. And as we know, when Parikshit was in the womb of his mother, Ashwatthama sent a heat weapon, a Brahmastra weapon, to destroy the child, the last surviving member of the only, member of the Pandava race, which would continue the line. He wanted to end the line, and so he launched a lethal nuclear weapon at the child within the womb. And Krishna covered Parikshit within the womb of his mother and protected him. So Uttarayana could not only mean an astrological term describing the position of the sun in either the northern or the southern hemisphere, but from a devotee point of view, the way the devotees see it, Uttarayana refers to Krishna. Bhima was fatally wounded on the battlefield there. He was laid out on a bed of arrows. He could have left his body, which was for all practical purposes no longer functional. It was dysfunctional. But he was waiting for Uttarayana. He was waiting for Krishna. He was waiting for Krishna to appear before him. So why would Krishna blesses those who support him, those who befriend him, those who lend themselves to the execution of his mission in this world. But why would Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appear before Bhisma, who stood in the way of the Pandavas' legal and rightful ascension to the throne? Why would he come and appear before Bhisma when Bhisma was the number one stumbling block for winning the Kurukshetra war and regaining for the Pandavas everything that had been stolen from them? Because Bhisma's a great devotee. God's up there in the spiritual world, and there's hallelujahs and hosannas and people serving him and prostrating themselves before him. He says, sometimes he gets a little tired of all the majesty and the protocol and the hallelujahs and hosannas. He gets tired of his role as the majestic Lord who, out of fear of him, the sun and moon rise and set, the wind blows, and death chases everybody. He wants to be chastised. He wants to be amongst those devotees who not just do everything that he wants them to do, but who assume the role of his opponents. And we all had this experience when we were kids. It's one thing to be all part of the same team, but it's another thing every once in a while, just for extra drama, for extra suspense, to divide up. You're all friends, but sometimes you be cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, and you contend. It's all play acting, of course, because you're friends, but you act different roles in order to create tension, confrontation. Krishna descends into this material world, and one of the reasons that he descends into this material world is so he can enjoy being challenged. No ordinary person can challenge the Almighty Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he arranges it. Eto sarato gatim pradipadya sadya samrina sambadi anabadi ago puyosha kashamapaya sapo mayavan matashtarabita. When the Kumaras cursed Jai and Vijay, his own intimate doorkeepers, to take birth in the material world, and the Lord appeared on the scene to agitate the dispute, he said to the Kumaras, by way of consoling them, don't feel bad that you've flown off the handle, gotten angry and overreacted and cursed these two doorkeepers to take birth in the material world. Eto sarato gatim pradipadya sada sambanita sambadi anubari yoga. You acted according to my will. It was my will that they go to the material world because I'm going to go. I want them to precede me and to act the role as great demons. So it's okay. They're going to go according to my will. They're going to take a vital role in my pastimes by opposing me. And they won't be there long anyway. They'll only be there for 3 births. And even though they're going to be opposing me, in that opposition, in that anger, in that mood of wanting to fight me, contend with me, they are going to be thinking of me 24 hours a day. Samadhi, Sambrita, Nabada, Yogo. Even though they're apparently demons, apparently off course, by the concentration of anger on me, whatever it be, whether it be fear, as in the case of Kamsa, envy, as in the case of Sisupal, or anger, as in the case of Hiranyakashipu, whatever the mood be, they're going to be thinking of me 24 hours a day. Narada Muni marvels, says, it may be that the enemies of the Lord are more Krishna conscious than the devotees. There's a certain intensity, there's a certain concentration that the enemies of the Lord achieve that's distinct from the way the devotees see the Lord. Of course, this is just amusing. This is just another way of looking at things. We're all advised to think of the Lord favorably, to cultivate love, not fear, not envy, not anger. But it's interesting that whenever you add Krishna into the equation, the result is always purification. In each of these cases, Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, Kamsa, Sisupal, they all got liberation because they were thinking of the Lord with a great intensity. Now, Vena was another person who we read about in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vena was against their Lord. Vena opposed the Lord. Vena wanted to replace the Lord. He said, Kimnu Balashusudana, the sages and saints who were worshiping and offering puja to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vena demeaned them, belittled them by saying they were like little children finding somebody else to worship when in fact they had better be grateful to the father and mother who are the actual providers. He said, I'm the king, I'm the actual provider. You don't need to go off like immature children after some Vishnu or some Krishna. But the difference between the way the orientation of Vena to Krishna and Hiranyakashipu says, Vena didn't think about Krishna at all. He dismissed him, and he wasn't at all Krishna conscious. And when Vena got killed, he did not get any such exalted position as the aforementioned personalities. The absorption in the thought of Krishna as an enemy is also glorified by great devotees, including Narada Muni. Bhisma was chosen by Krishna to oppose him for the purpose of exhibiting the Lord's power in a greater way. Bhisma was divine. He was born of the goddess Ganga, the personality of the river. He was trained by Parasaram in the military arts. He was blessed by Indra, the Prajapatis, the great sages. He lived the first 32 years of his life in the heavenly planets. So imagine the culture, imagine the expertise, unmatched within this material world. And it was only after he had mastered all the military and diplomatic and political arts that he was sent back to his father Santanu by his mother Ganga. He was more than qualified to be king of the world. And yet his dharma, his mission in serving the Lord, his role was not to be number one, but always to be number two. He was happy with that. He spent his whole life. He never became king, though he was far more qualified than any of the ones who actually became king. And I dare to say even Yudhishthira himself. He was far more equipped. He was far more wise, far more learned. Yet he gave up all of that because he saw that Krishna wanted him not to be number one, but to be number two. And this is a characteristic we find in the lives of devotees. Krishna says, Samaham sarvabhutashu name dveshanam ye bhajanti tuma mai teshu avham. As the seed-giving father of all living beings, the Lord is not partial to some and inimical to others. He sees all living beings as his children, as his parts and parcels. He is aham bija pradapi, the seed-giving father of all living beings. And having said that, having established his impartiality, then he says, Ye bhajanti tu mam bhakta mai teshu aham. Having said that, those who render service to me, I am in them and they are in me. I have a special place in my heart for those who render special service. And this does not violate the principle of impartiality. Any father is equally and kindly disposed to all of his children, but to those who are particularly interested in furthering the father's plan, who are doing what the father wants them to do, who know what is in the mind of the father, who can even anticipate what's in the mind of the father. The father naturally has a special place in his heart for them. This verse reflects that special place in the Lord's heart for his surrendered devotees. Bhisma is waiting for Uttarayana. He's waiting for that personality who entered into the womb of Uttara and protected another great devotee named Maharaj Parikshit. What's happening here? The scenario that's being set up here is wherever you have a devotee, you also have Krishna. Bhisma is not, he's going to hang on, he's going to maintain, he's going to continue to circulate his life force in a body, every square inch of which is perforated by arrows, because he's not going to leave unless this be a Krishna conscious event, which is going to be echoed throughout the ages, which is going to be an example, a hallmark of how a devotee, Bhisma has shown how a devotee lives. Now he's showing how a devotee leaves. Just like Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit's gestation, his period within the womb of his mother, his ultimate birth, his life and his death, it was more about Krishna than it was about Maharaj Parikshit. His birth was more about Krishna than it was about Maharaj Parikshit. His death was more about Krishna than it was about Maharaj Parikshit. What is the verse? Tam mopayatam pratyantam vibra ganga chadevam dvijam titra dvijapasha kastuka staksa dasato alam gayatu vishnukata. The time of leaving my body. Maharaj Parikshit said, all I want, my only cherished desire at the time of quitting this body, is that you all go on chanting the names of Lord Vishnu, and that I be able to decorate my hearing, fill my heart with the sounds of his glorification at the time of leaving this body. Just as his birth had been more about Krishna than about him, his death was more about Krishna than about him. So in common with other rarefied devotees of the Lord, Bhisma has shown us how to live in Krishna consciousness. Now he's showing us how to leave in Krishna consciousness. He's not going to do that until Uttarayana, till that Lord who protected Maharaj Parikshit within the womb of his mother Uttara appears front and center before him. It says, Tribhuvanam Kamalam Tamalavaram Ravi Kuram Garam Babane Vapura Lakakudaricharam Vijaya Shakur Ashtu Main Bajam. I'm only going to be satisfied, Bhisma says, until my eyes, like bees honing on a flower, are able to perceive, to get the darshan of the Lord at the very moment of my leaving my body. As soon as we say this, as soon as we describe this, what comes to mind but the passing of Haridas Thakur and the Leela of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Haridas Thakur had lived, I think Haridas Thakur was somewhat aged. He was senior in age to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Had taken a vow, as you know, to chant 300,000 names of God every day. And as he aged, it took him longer and longer to complete his 300,000 rounds a day. As a younger man, he would be able to complete them in 20, 21 hours and have 3 or 4 hours for eating and sleeping. However, as his body aged and he slowed down, it then started taking him 22 hours to chant the full measure of his rounds. And he only had 2 hours for eating and sleeping. And then finally it took him 23 hours as he got older. And he only had 1 hour for eating and sleeping. And as he got older, it took him started to take him the full 24 hours to chant the measured number of rounds. And no sooner would he finish at midnight one day than he have to start over again. So not only was he aged to start with, but he wasn't having any time to eat or sleep. So he's getting very thin. Lord Chaitanya said, you've been keeping up this vow for so many years. I'm fully satisfied. I'm fully happy. See, I'm smiling upon you. I'm benedicting you in the best way I know how. I'm pleased with you. Now my request is, please reduce the number of your rounds. You've achieved the result of my satisfaction. Haridas Thakur said, I have another idea. Lord, I've intimated from the increasing intensity of your ecstatic symptoms and of your increasingly eccentric behavior by the world's standards, that you're not going to be around here much longer. You're getting ready to quit your pastimes and merge 100% in the mood of Radharani, loving Krishna. I don't want to be here. I don't want to inhabit an earth in which you have absented yourself. So grant me this boon, that before you leave, grant me the blessing that I leave before you, that I precede you. Lord Chaitanya didn't say anything outright, but kind of did this little thing that people from India do and smile. So the next day, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed up at the Bhajan Kutir of Haridas Thakur, and he just stood there, smiling down on Haridas Thakur, who was prostrated at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. And Haridas Thakur, as he was chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, had his eyes fixed on the divine, effulgent form. Anarpita charam charat kunayavatina karo samarpitam adatorjanam shabhakti sriya hariparata sunda dyuti sadara sadari kandare shpurituva sachinanda nandana. Fully absorbed in the sight of the supreme golden avatar standing before him, just like a bee is fully focused on the honey and the flower, with undivided attention, with his eyes fixed on the form of the Lord and his mouth saying the names of the Lord. He quit his body. He showed how to live in Krishna consciousness. He showed how to leave in Krishna consciousness. Lord Chaitanya, although all living beings are his parts and parcels, although he is not favorable to one and inimical to another, all that is true. None of that was violated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's picking up the body of Haridas Thakur, who had dedicated himself, body, mind, and soul, with unflinching unerring, unmotivated, uninterrupted devotion for an entire lifetime. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was picking up the body of Haridas Thakur and dancing with it, did not violate the principle of impartiality. I hope you can understand this. Not only did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dance there on the beach, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, carrying the body of Lord of Haridas Thakur. But after some time, he with his own hands placed the body gently and lovingly on the sands of the beach there at Jagannath Puri, and with his own hands, he made a cavity in the earth. And with his own hands, he laid Haridas Thakur and he covered it up with his own hands. Then, wanting to sponsor a great feast in honor of the life, the glorious life of Haridas Thakur, wanting to glorify his devotee, Lord Chaitanya went. Sannyasis, they have a cloth. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went and he held out his cloth to the merchants in the marketplace. And he got donations of foodstuffs and raw goods, all of which was used to make a beautiful feast for all the devotees. Hundreds and hundreds of people came to the Samadhi resting place of Haridas Thakur. They chanted, they danced, they celebrated, they feasted. And even today, if you visit Jagannath Puri, you can go to that same spot. There's a beautiful little temple. There's some wonderful cows there. Their specialty is a molasses, a round ball molasses sweet made with gore and cow's milk. There's a well from which you can pull up buckets of pure crystal clear water. Even though it's just a few feet from the salty ocean, still the peculiarity of this well is that it's unsalted, pure sweet water. And you can chant. There's a little shrine there with the actual beads that Haridas Thakur used to chant 300,000 names of God. You can sit in there and also do your japa. When one thinks of the leaving, the exemplary way that Haridas Thakur left his body, it is entirely reminiscent of the way that Bhisma is leaving his body. He held out until Krishna would appear before him. And not only Krishna, but consider who was present there, holding vigil, listening to the nectarine words flowing from the mouth of Bhisma. Consider the quality of the assembly there. The war is over. All the bad guys are dead. The only survivors are the 5 Pandavas, Krishna. They are present. Pandu, Putra, Upashanam, Prashraya, Shreyam, Vadadiyam, Chakrachuta, Ranambaram. The Pandavas are standing around. They're the only father they've ever really known. Everything they learned, everything that they've become as fine, upstanding, righteous young men and devotees of the Lord, they imbibed from Bhisma. Even their bhakti, their devotional service, they imbibed from Bhisma. There was a point where they had not met Krishna throughout the entirety of their infancy and their young manhood. They never met Krishna. Krishna was on the planet, but he was in Mathura, he was in Dwarka. The Pandavas were in Hastinapur. So they never met Krishna until they were young men. It wasn't actually until they came back from the Swayamvar of Draupadi, and Arjuna had Draupadi as his wife, that Krishna finally came to visit them in Hastinapur. So they did not meet him until they were all on the verge of marriage. I believe it was the marriage of the Pandavas to Draupadi, which was the occasion of Krishna's first physically appearing before them in that manifested incarnation. And yet they were already pure devotees of Krishna. How was that? It was because of Bhisma Dev. Bhisma not only taught them all of the material arts and sciences, but he communicated from himself as their teacher, as their exemplar, as their father figure. He communicated to the young boys. Of course, the Kauravas had the same opportunity, but their hearts weren't open to Krishna Bhakti. You have to be open to Krishna Bhakti. So it was through Bhisma Dev, Evam Parampara Praptya. And you'll find that never does anyone at any time, under any place, under any circumstances, ever get ignited with the flame of bhakti without having first received that from another devotee. That's the way bhakti comes to you. Doesn't come through mental speculation, doesn't come from yoga, it doesn't come through any of your own efforts. It comes from the Lord through his pure devotees. Atapi te deva padambujabe prashadana shinda rehita janiti tadvam bhagavahi na chanyo eko chirinvichanma. Aside from the causeless mercy of the Lord, descending down from his lotus feet, just like the Ganges, having touched the lotus feet of the Lord, descends down throughout the three worlds to purify upper, middle, and lower planetary systems. The only way that anyone can become purified and inspired and ignited by devotional service to the Lord is by that mercy of the Lord, which is coming down through his lotus feet. That is the only way. And so it is with a great sense of wonder and astonishment that Bhisma is echoing these words, Hatapi Ekanta Bhaktishu. Bhakti, of course, is the yoga of love and devotion. And Bhisma is self-describing himself. Tatapi Ekanta Bhaktishu, Bhashe Bhupanunankatam. I have been an unflinching bhakti, unflinching servant of the Lord throughout my whole life. Now there's devotional service, and then there's unflinching devotional service. There's devotional service, and then there's ahaituki apratiyata. There's devotional service that you do it for some time, 1 or 2 or 3 hours, and then you take a break and you do something for yourself. That's interrupted devotional service. So what you're doing is you're in the mundane world and you're conceding that Krishna is the Lord. You're conceding that devotional service to the Lord is the highest principle. But you're really in the mundane world. You're thinking of material names, forms, qualities, and pastimes. And then you're reaching out. You're trying to understand. You're trying to describe the qualities of the Lord, which have nothing to do with mundane names, qualities, forms. So you're not really in devotional service. You're aspiring for devotional service. Eventually, the spiritual qualities will come in and remove, they'll eradicate the material impressions, material contaminations. It will take some time. So there are devotees who do devotional service, but it is not uninterrupted. So they cannot be called unflinching devotees of the Lord. Interesting thing, when I first met Prabhupada in 1971, he came to us from Bombay, spent 4 days in Australia visiting the devotees. Now, I had been an English major in college, read a lot of novels, a lot of fiction. Generally speaking, on the back flap of a book of fiction is a picture of the author and some biographical information. So that life story of the author is quite different from the story of the book. He's gone somewhere, lived there, visited libraries, consulted with, different people, different experts in different fields, and he's created a book of fiction. But his own life is different from that which he's written about. He's kind of picked people's brains. Chaitanya Charan told me the best writer is the best robber. So he's taken different things from different areas, collated it, and created a believable, a creditable plot and narrative. But his life is different. So I had read, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, what little literature was available in 1971. But there was, because of my conditioning, there was this little thought in my head, okay, here's the work, here's the opus. I wonder what the author's like. Because my experience is the author's always different from the tale he tells. Tale he tells is not necessarily indicative of the lifestyle that he himself lives. There's obviously some overlap because he wouldn't be interested in writing about certain areas if he didn't have some experience or interest in it. But that's what it means to be a work of fiction. It's not autobiographical. So I was thinking, what is the author like? Here's the work. What is the author like? And so Prabhupada came to Australia. I was in charge at that time, and pretty much spent the whole 4 days with Prabhupada, whether it was inside of his room or visiting the temple, or there were a number of public speaking engagements, which I had arranged. I was pretty much tied to Prabhupada at the hip, except when he was sleeping. There wasn't a single moment during those 4 days where Prabhupada wasn't echoing scripture, where he wasn't glorifying Krishna. And if you knew the scripture, you knew it was totally and 100% on the basis of scriptural evidence. And I realized there is no difference between this devotee and the works. There's no difference between the author and the work, the composition. He is the living, breathing scripture. He doesn't speak even one word. He doesn't have one thought apart from what's already there in the scripture. So this is a resident of the spiritual world. He may be walking amongst us, may be visible in a material body. He may be using vocal cords like we are. He has a retina, he has skin, he has flesh and blood. But everything has become totally transformed because of his unflinching attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in being attached to the Lord, his whole life was a sacrifice for others. What 70, 72, 75, 78-year-old man constantly travels 2 days here, 3 days there, 4 days there, back on the plane, arriving at another location. Who does that in their 70s and early 80s? For a young person, it's fun to go to Cancun, go down to St. Thomas or Nassau for a vacation once a year, go one of those Apple vacations or take a cruise as a break, as a change of pace. But to do that constantly is an extreme, uncomfortable austerity. What was motivating him? Titikshava Karunika, compassion for all living entities. His life was not his. There wasn't anything that he laid claim to. Everything was for others. I remember once I was the president in San Francisco. So Jayatirtha was the GBC. He arranged a retreat for the temple presidents in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Laguna Beach. He'd rented a house in Las Vegas. Kushakrata was invited as the preeminent scholar of the time. Jayatirtha had arranged a retreat for the leaders of the West Coast temples for 4 days in Las Vegas. There was no business, there was no management. We were secluded, and Kushakrata went through the Bhagavad Gita with us. It was sublime. It was sublime. Bless Jayatirtha for doing that. But when he wrote to Prabhupada that he'd done that, I think he was expecting a little bit of praise, because we were certainly appreciative. I think he was expecting a little praise from Prabhupada. Prabhupada bragged. He said, retreat? What is this retreat? He said, I never went on a retreat. I never told you anything about retreats. And when you think about it, Prabhupada never had a single moment of privacy. He never took anything for himself. Everything was for others. That's what impresses the Lord. The bait on the hook is so attractive. The fish sees the hook, it sees the line, it sees the bait, it knows something's up here. Something suspicious. Why is there a line attached to this nice little morsel? But it can't resist taking the bait and getting hooked. So similarly, it is said, Vipra duya duya lata daravinda parada vinda vimakatsha pacham manyetara pitomana manovichinata pranam. Says the mentality of selfless service, glorifying the Lord and working for the benefit without any personal motivation or agenda of others is such an attractive lure, such an attractive bait that the Lord cannot resist, just like the fish cannot resist it. And Bhisma is exactly the same way. Tatapi ekanta bhaktishu bhashya bhupana yanme shunstakisha. Why is it that the Supreme Lord of Vaikuntha the master of all the demigods and the planetary executive heads, Tatapi Ekanta. How is it that the Lord, who is the Father of all living beings and who is equally disposed towards every living being within the material and spiritual world, how is it that he has manifested in his beautiful form, blackish like a monsoon cloud, yellow dotty like lightning? How is it that he's visible before my eyes at the last stage of my life? Because even though he's equally disposed to all living beings, I am his unflinching devotee. There has not been a moment in the extended duration of my 256 years on the earth planet where I have not consecrated my word, my thoughts, my body, my wealth, my deeds to others. Bhisma took nothing for himself. He did not have female companionship. He did not have a kingdom. He did not have personal wealth. He gave his life to 4 generations of Kauravas, supported them, trained them, and ultimately gave his life for them. On the basis of his unflinching faith and uninterrupted and unselfish devotion to the Lord, none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, out of his causeless mercy. The Lord cannot be controlled by any, and yet, like the fish cannot resist certain lures, Krishna, the unconquerable, the master of everything, comes at the time of Bhisma's leaving his body and stands with tears in his eyes, humbly and submissively, allowing Bhisma to drink in the unlimited nectarine beauty of his form at the time of leaving his material body. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's I'm gonna have to run now we have to cook quesadillas and samosas and get ready for the high school students who are arriving from Lehigh in about 45 minutes, kind of an impromptu tour. They had been scheduled to go to the Gurudwara in Salt Lake City this morning, but the Gurudwara canceled. And so I got a text early this morning, can we come to the Christian temple in Spanish Fork? So we've got llamas to catch and things to cook. But I hope that you thought it was worth your while to join us here. Appreciate Rakesh was right on, first one on Facebook Live. Good morning, Rakesh. Quickly followed by Jean. Then we had Manasaganga, Govinda Dev in short order, Brent, Gary Montana, Raghav Sadotra, thank you, by Bobby, who's just, she's feeling okay, but she's just coming out of COVID. She tested positive again still yesterday. So she won't be able to help us as she normally does with the Lama tour and the cooking. So it's me and Yashoda and maybe Nandarani. We're going to get cracking. Rita, I always follow your wonderful posts on Facebook. They're always interesting. Thanks for joining us. Out of the park. Love the discussion of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much, Govinda Day. And the last word we always give to our Zoom buddy here, Bhakta Ram. Ta-ta!
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribo.
I'll be quick since you got to go. Some of these, may have to take a little poetic license with them, but with Krishna in the equation, the result is perfection. There is a way to grow and a way to go. Read the Bhagavatam and you will know.
Oh, I love that. That's spot on.
Like the flower and the bee, make Krishna all you see.
Oh, perfectly appropriate for the lesson today.
Be of single focus, seek shelter at the feet like lotus.
Rob, I gotta hand it to you. You have a gift. We're so lucky to have you on this forum. Okay, I'm gonna post this. I'm gonna share it on our other Facebook pages, and then I'm gonna run. But this has been Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you all for the honor and the privilege of conducting this discussion with you. I can't wait till we're together again next Monday. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm just going to wait a minute or two while all the stars and all the thumbs up and all the hearts subside. It's always good for our, yeah. Okay, there we go.